we assumed that chapter was permanently buried. Yet, against all odds, the deep-rooted tension between these two icons has miraculously clawed back to the surface. Only this go-around, the collateral damage is significantly more complicated than anticipated, largely because Luka Doncic has found himself squarely in the crossfire. During a recent live broadcast, a viewer pressed the point guard for his genuine perspective on Luka relocating to Los Angeles, prompting a chilling response. I gave my brother a strict warning before he stepped into that building. You are never truly secure around a viper. Believe me, that brief soundbite merely scratches the surface. Once you examine the intricate web connecting him to Sean Combs and the shadowy underbelly of Los Angeles, alongside whispers of pulling others into the fold, you quickly understand we have transcended standard locker room friction. We are witnessing a colossal paradigm shift capable of dismantling a legendary legacy and potentially shaking the purple and gold empire to its very core. Before digging deeper, we must drop the illusion that this organization operates like a traditional sports franchise. The Slovenian phenom did not simply relocate out west to shoot hoops. He inadvertently stepped into a deeply entrenched, high-stakes machine that dwarfs any individual stat sheet. Casual fans watch nightly recaps and assume the young star reached basketball paradise, but the stark truth is vastly different. The veteran cornerstone has fully transitioned into the ultimate power broker overseeing a sprawling entertainment syndicate heavily intertwined with major production companies. It is a highly controlled environment demanding everyone in his gravitational pull strictly adhere to a manufactured narrative where he remains the solitary hero. That profound loss of autonomy is exactly what his former teammate was cautioning against. He subtly warned that the phenom was wandering blindly into a shark tank run by ruthless figures lacking moral constraints. This is an exclusive realm where powerful handshakes and elite gatherings outweigh championships. Unsettlingly enough, that is still far from the most disturbing element here. For a genuine glimpse into the abyss of this elite society, you simply must examine the digital paper trail that his formidable public relations machinery is desperately trying to erase.
Hey, everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party, so.
Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah.
The blatant audacity shows a profound lack of fear regarding public perception. We are talking about exclusive circles synonymous with harrowing, sinister rumors, which at the time were easily dismissed as harmless VIP name-dropping. However, the moment those sweeping federal charges came down against the disgraced executive, that seemingly innocent video transformed into a glaring testament to Los Angeles' deeply problematic elite. Pay close attention to how the narrative shifted once the handcuffs clicked. The loyalty evaporated instantly. You must study the masterful, cold-blooded pivot executed the moment optics became toxic. Less than 48 hours after that stomach-churning hotel security tape of the music mogul assaulting his former partner broke the internet, the basketball icon discreetly severed his digital ties. It was a meticulously orchestrated, entirely voiceless retreat designed to shield his billion-dollar brand. Consider the profound irony here. We are analyzing an individual who routinely vocalizes stances on socio-political issues globally, yet his agonizing silence regarding this sprawling federal investigation is incredibly telling. Why stay quiet now? The unvarnished truth is painfully obvious. Yet, the situation runs profoundly deeper than a simple unfollow. By April 2025, concrete legal documentation outlining their specific relationship began to materialize, emerging despite a massive, coordinated effort by mainstream sports media to suppress it. Recall that staggering 87-page legal filing submitted by one of the primary accusers. Are you prepared for the inevitable fallout? Sworn court documents left zero room for interpretation, explicitly naming global titans of industry as regular fixtures at those truly unspeakable behind-closed-doors gatherings. The allegations went far beyond mere attendance, suggesting deep participatory involvement. This exact juncture is where the new franchise star becomes frighteningly relevant. Analyzing the legal descriptions of those events, it becomes impossible to ignore the chilling parallels. You look directly into that locker room and recognize the exact same psychological framework of absolute dominance. Every roster spot is essentially reduced to a pawn, serving his grand legacy. Furthermore, regarding those illicit industry events, The star forward hardly walked in alone. Unsealed testimonies and witness registries pointed directly toward key figures operating within his trusted, tight-knit entourage, severely cementing the reality that his core crew was immersed in that environment. This legacy is tethered to Hollywood's darkest chapters. Horrifyingly, a calculated effort now exists to drag the young phenom directly into that exact same chaotic vortex. The young guard's motivations are pure. He steps on the hardwood strictly to compete. Unfortunately, he has been parachuted into a toxic hierarchy where the patriarch will stop at absolutely nothing to preserve his artificial throne. Now, if your initial reaction was to dismiss the cautionary advice as mere bitterness or an overdramatic grudge against a former teammate, you desperately need a historical reality check. The masses conveniently forget that years ago, the dynamic point guard stood precisely where the young star stands today, narrowly escaping with his identity intact. Should you share my analytical curiosity, you might be questioning the suspiciously sudden rankings drop. Why has a phenomenal talent abruptly plummeted to fourth place in the most valuable player conversation, all while enduring arbitrary front office investigations? This unfolds right after he dropped 60 points in a masterclass performance, shattering iconic franchise records previously held by the late, great Mamba. To comprehend this systematic suppression, carefully analyze the identical psychological warfare deployed against a rising star back in 2014. Keep in mind, long before the prodigal son orchestrated his grand return, that metropolis belonged entirely to the young guard. He was a pure basketball artist devoid of external chaos. The instant the veteran arrived, the dynamic shifted into a brutal corporate takeover. The public narrative promised a partnership built on mutual respect, yet the reality quickly devolved into an environment where a rising superstar was belittled as a subordinate. If you require tangible evidence, critically evaluate why a grown professional felt comfortable publicly addressing an elite peer as a child during media scrums. The patronizing quotes about molding him were intentional power plays. That condescension barely scratches the surface. We all witnessed those visceral, mid-court berating sessions where the veteran aggressively dressed down his teammate on national television, projecting total dominance. Heading back to the studio, Game 2 of our double feature is officially underway in Oakland. Incredibly, the on-court disrespect is merely a footnote. Want to uncover the most bone-chilling aspect of this entire saga? This obsession with absolute control extends miles beyond the hardwood. It mirrors the exact blueprint currently used to drag his newest co-star into that treacherous entertainment labyrinth. Rumors back in 2017 suggested a heavily pressured campaign to forcibly assimilate his younger counterpart into that exact same shadowy celebrity underworld. The elite power circles, the silent industry loyalties, all of it. Ultimately, the young guard flatly refused, prioritizing his soul over that compromised lifestyle. The very moment it became clear that Kyrie's spirit could not be tamed, the atmosphere shifted into something suffocating. It is a familiar chapter in this legacy. Complete submission is the demand. If you refuse to be molded, you are systematically dismantled. Yet, the execution is entirely silent. He maintains the pristine image of a benevolent leader, leaving the isolated player to shoulder the burden of the villain narrative alone. Recall a time when Kyrie was universally embraced by the press, a period that abruptly ended the moment the foundation fractured. The echoes of that history are undeniable, playing out in real time with the current dismantling of Luka's reputation. As soon as the young prodigy began casting a larger shadow, surpassing that sacred Laker milestone set by Kobe, an invisible machinery engaged to silence the momentum. There is no logical framework to explain why powerful sports agencies suddenly shifted their unified narrative, deliberately framing a generational talent as a problematic presence in the locker room. It defies reason that his standing in the most valuable player race plummeted while he was delivering historical performances. The campaign then bled into his private life, crossing lines that reveal a deeply uncomfortable reality about the business of greatness. Whispers throughout Los Angeles suggest that the devastating dissolution of his relationship and the ensuing custody dispute were not merely unfortunate coincidences occurring at the worst possible time. Industry insiders quietly point toward a calculated public relations apparatus. the same shield that guards the ultimate family man persona as the architect behind the relentless personal exposure. The pattern is unmistakable. It is a systematic penalty for refusing to bow to the established hierarchy, an intentional erosion of willpower designed to force surrender. This psychological warfare has always been the unwritten rule. The environment becomes a pressure cooker of isolation, leaving a singular ultimatum: assimilate completely into the empire or face the orchestrated wrath of its ruler. This is not merely speculation or an isolated theory. A simple, objective look at the timeline reveals a profound and unsettling truth. A player alters the record books, and mere 48 hours afterward, an administration that has historically catered to a singular icon hands down a suspension over an insignificant procedural flaw. Immediately following, the most valuable player considerations banish him to the fourth spot, placing him beneath peers whose statistical contributions pale entirely in comparison. Consider the crucial missed attempt against Miami a few weeks past. Instead of absorbing the weight of failure, the narrative was masterfully redirected toward his younger counterpart during the post-game media availability.
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously you have to ask Luka what he saw on that, but I thought he had a good look.
Now, in 2026, observing a generational talent appear fundamentally broken at the podium while his rightful hardware is systematically redirected, the gravity of the situation settles in. The inescapable conclusion is that the grand machinery of legacy management is operating at full capacity once more. However, the psychological depth of this operation is far more intricate than it appears. The collateral damage extends far beyond those two brilliant minds. Attributing this friction to mere organizational misfortune requires entirely ignoring 15 years of deeply established behavioral patterns at the highest level of the sport. The recruitment process relies on identifying apex competitors, drawing them in with the promise of guided greatness and shared historical impact. Yet, the moment the contract is signed, a methodical erasure of their basketball identity begins. It operates as a psychological dismantling. Generational talents are lured by the ultimate prize, only to be marginalized into specialized utility pieces, ensuring the primary star's statistical dominance remains completely unchallenged. Analyze the transformation of the cornerstone forward arriving from Minnesota back in 2014. Prior to that union, he commanded the league, delivering 26 points and 13 rebounds nightly as an undeniable franchise pillar. Upon entering the royal court, that dominance was immediately hollowed out, transforming him into a perimeter decoy whose rhythm depended entirely on the sudden charity of the primary ball handler. The most profound aspect, however, was still to come. The dismantling transcended the hardwood. A public theater of humiliation was orchestrated on social media, immortalized by a deeply pointed demand for conformity that shattered the remaining confidence. That message was devoid of ambiguity. The leader utilized a media availability to explicitly confirm the psychological strike was aimed directly at his struggling teammate, weaponizing the man's difficult transition. Consider the profound mental toll of operating at an elite level, only to face indirect public mockery from a peer whose primary objective is to enforce unquestioned submission. Then, we must examine the sacrifice extracted in Florida. Another franchise cornerstone, capable of dominating with 24 points an evening, was structurally required to abandon his natural offensive artistry. He was confined to defensive containment, completely vacating the interior so the spotlight could shine unbroken on one man. An entire trajectory of individual greatness was willfully surrendered, traded simply to survive within an ecosystem that demands absolute compliance. By the conclusion of that era, the historical narrative had wrongly reduced a transcendent talent to a mere complementary piece. One might assume internal loyalty would spare a chosen brother. The past 5 years in Los Angeles paint a drastically different picture. Approaching the 2025 trade window, deeply embedded league executives confirmed quiet discussions regarding the immediate exile of that same brother. The instant his physical dominance began to wane, any genuine emotional resonance displayed during these inevitable departures is nothing more than a carefully curated illusion meant to preserve a specific narrative. Veterans from within those very sanctuaries have spoken openly, detailing a chilling apathy toward the displacement of core teammates. The visible sorrow is a theatrical masterpiece, executed flawlessly for public consumption. In the shadows, The meticulous search for the next foundational pillar to sustain the empire is a constant cycle. The unwavering consistency of this method carries a deeply unsettling weight. It is a relentless cycle of acquiring fierce competitors, fracturing their basketball identity, and discarding them the moment the corporate machinery requires a revitalized aesthetic. Yet, a fundamental miscalculation occurred. This new prodigy possesses a vastly different psychological makeup. Total surrender and quiet compliance are simply not woven into his DNA. Beneath the surface, a quiet rebellion is materializing, sending profound tremors through the core of the representation agency. A former pupil, who intimately understands the system, refuses to be a passive observer. He maintains relentless, nightly communication with his former running mate, acting as a mental anchor. That connection represents a loyalty forged in fire, standing completely opposed to the current environment. To grasp the magnitude of this dynamic, one must recognize that the chemistry they forged in Texas transcended the artificial narratives often constructed for media consumption. Their tenure together represented a profound existential threat to the established order. It thrived on a foundational element that the reigning regime has systematically failed to comprehend throughout history. It was an authentic partnership, completely devoid of internal politics and subjugation. Two absolute masters of their craft were singularly focused on collective triumph. If we are analyzing orchestrated dismantlings, the evidence speaks volumes. Consider the staggering reality of a franchise cornerstone being abruptly relocated in the dead of night, stripped entirely of his agency and completely isolated from the decision-making process. A sterile alert delivered at 2 a.m. signaled his forced relocation to the ultimate spotlight. The mechanics of the transaction raised immediate alarms, but the most telling indicator was the visceral response from his closest confidant. Historically, when a peer ascends to such a storied franchise, the separation is marked by celebratory public endorsements. Instead, during a Raw broadcast in March of 2025, the devastating emotional toll of the separation was laid completely bare. Pressed later by the media regarding the shift in team dynamics, the response intentionally bypassed any superficial commentary regarding basketball strategy or roster construction.
So it's still a grieving process right now. Miss my hermano. We had a lot of time together. Keith too, and Maxie. And we just built some bonds that went beyond the basketball court.
A profound sense of dread washed over him, recognizing that someone he cared for had just stumbled into the precise psychological snare he had sacrificed years attempting to break free from. Analyzing this through a critical lens reveals a repeating cycle of mental conditioning. Kyrie was merely 23 years old when LeBron stepped into his orbit to assert dominance. Luka sits at 26. Each of these generational talents was promised the keys to the kingdom, only to find themselves repurposed as high-end scaffolding to prop up one man's ultimate legacy. Taking things a step deeper during a live broadcast, Kyrie delivered a profound observation that perfectly dissects the shadow operations running beneath the glamorous surface of the Los Angeles Lakers. His exact words painted a chilling picture. LeBron is not merely playing a sport. He is manipulating the entire atmosphere. He absorbed the darker lessons of Los Angeles. Mastering the space means mastering the individual. When sheer force fails to defeat an opponent, you invite them inside your sanctuary and quietly turn them into a servant. Yet the narrative takes an even darker psychological turn from there. While Luka exhausts himself pursuing victory and chasing the immortal shadows of Kobe Bryant, LeBron seemingly pulls the entire organization down the Western Conference standings simply to artificially inflate numbers alongside his eldest boy. He performs the role of the devoted patriarch for the flashing lenses, quietly squandering the absolute physical peak of a top-tier global phenom, all while the press insists Luka's defensive efforts are the real issue. This leads us directly into the quiet murmurs echoing through front offices, suggesting the driving force behind this orchestrated dismantling of Luka's rising empire, explaining the unexplainable discipline and the sudden plummet in most valuable player considerations. It all stems from Luka committing the ultimate unspoken sin within that locker room. Whispers from the inner sanctum suggest the expectation was clear. Luka was supposed to act as the primary guide, shouldering the burden of developing Bronny's foundation and crafting an illusion of stardom. However, Luka firmly rejected the role of caretaker for the king's heir. The sheer audacity of this request becomes staggering when you recognize he was never truly looking for a partner on the floor. He attempted to reduce a 5-time first-team All-League icon into an exorbitantly paid tutor. Yet the most frustrating element of this saga lies somewhere else entirely. Perhaps it could be rationalized if the assignment involved molding a genuine prodigy flashing undeniable potential. Instead, we are discussing a rookie currently scraping together a mere 2.3 points each night. Truthfully, his presence in purple and gold exists solely because an icon leveraged his influence over an entire franchise. The chilling irony here rests in Kyrie Irving previously cautioning Luka regarding this precise entanglement. This represents the defining characteristic of this shadowy ecosystem, a carefully constructed environment designed to force individuals into an impossible, no-win paradigm. Should Luka decline to sacrifice his own development time to instruct the rookie, a highly influenced media apparatus immediately paints him as an egotistical detriment to the collective goal. Conversely, yielding to these demands means sacrificing his most dominant athletic years to manage a manufactured dynasty rather than pursuing actual championship glory. Picture the absolute fierce resolve of a Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant entertaining such a dynamic. Their singular focus was absolute domination of the enemy, not running a nepotistic enterprise between the lines. The situation deepens emotionally when you consider that Luka spent his formative years idolizing the very man orchestrating this friction, openly admitting his reverence during his teenage years playing overseas. The old adage about meeting idols rings tragically true here. We have moved far past simple locker room friction. This appears to be a deliberate attempt to dismantle a rising legend's trajectory. Circulating game footage captures a moment where an ankle injury was seemingly exaggerated the precise second it became apparent the final, decisive shot would belong to the younger superstar. Remaining on the court to witness another man's coronation was simply unacceptable. The visual evidence piles up, including moments where extended hands are completely disregarded, treating a peer like an invisible entity. The underlying broadcast is unmistakable. Refuse to participate in the construction of this familial mythology, and you will be systematically cast as the antagonist of the overarching narrative. The chemistry is being subtly eroded from within, while friendly voices in the press are permitted to steadily dismantle the younger guard's most valuable player campaign. This is the price of prioritizing personal excellence over a rookie's requested tutelage. Beyond the physical hardwood maneuvers, the deafening quiet surrounding the prestigious award race speaks volumes. We are witnessing the most aggressive silence the league has ever produced. Historically, this is a leader who has flooded social platforms and utilized every microphone to fiercely advocate for his allies. We clearly recall the relentless campaigns to secure defensive honors for Anthony Davis, or the constant elevation of secondary contributors just to reinforce his own reputation as the ultimate conductor. Yet when faced with a teammate producing historic statistics that genuinely challenge his supreme status and command of the spotlight, the support evaporates entirely. Not a single digital endorsement, zero public acknowledgement exists. This calculated void serves a singular purpose, allowing a co-star to capture the ultimate individual honor, fundamentally shatters the illusion of absolute unmatched supremacy. After all, the central pillar of the greatest ever argument crumbles if you are actively being outshined by multiple pieces within your own carefully curated system. It reduces an emperor to a mere bystander in the castle he built. Respected analysts like Charles Barkley have openly noted the visual of a monarch simply surviving while the youth carries the true burden.
And LeBron is probably the best third wheel in NBA history.
The veteran understands that a trophy presentation for his teammate forces a harsh global realization. He is no longer just aging gracefully. He is a 41-year-old passenger on a moving train. Therefore, instead of uplifting the next generation, he weaponizes his absence, allowing perfectly timed critical essays from the press to slowly erode his rival's foundation. It stands as a ruthlessly calculated tactic designed to insulate a crumbling monument, which brings us full circle to the haunting premonition that foreshadowed this psychological labyrinth. I issued a stark caution to a brother stepping into that Los Angeles spotlight. Safety is merely an illusion when navigating the tall grass alongside a venomous predator. When those chilling sentiments were first voiced, the masses dismissed them as another eccentric philosophical tangent, completely missing the profound gravity of the fundamental message. Reviewing the historical ledger tells a different story entirely. This was never a critique of play styles, it was a manual for sheer survival amidst the toxic theatricality of the West Coast. He witnessed the systematic stripping of autonomy from past all-stars, recognizing the precise methodology used to break down any elite talent that refused to bend the knee. The warning arrived long before the current fractures became public knowledge, born from the scars of a man who had already survived the emotional wreckage firsthand. For those questioning the validity of this analysis, the empirical evidence is glaring. Los Angeles currently boasts a staggering 9-2 record when the younger phenom operates without the aging king. Stripped of the subtle psychological warfare and the sudden disappearing acts during critical moments, the team transforms into a cohesive juggernaut. Statistics offer pure truth, even when the central narrative relies on deception. He stepped into the bright lights of California, envisioning the continuation of a majestic dynasty. In reality, he had confidently marched into an elaborate snare designed to suffocate his own ascendant legacy. At 26 years of age, positioned at the pinnacle of his athletic prime, he is cornered by a brutal dilemma. He must either shepherd a struggling rookie averaging 2 points a night, or accept his casting as the antagonist in a manufactured media takedown. This forces us to confront one final, haunting reality. Did Luka truly absorb the private counsel Kyrie offered in the shadows? Or has he waded too deeply into this toxic underbelly to ever escape?